Call, please.
Vice President Choke. Member Dorner.
Here.
Member Fay.
Here.
Member Qualcheck.
Here.
Member Leto.
Here.
Member Nelson.
Here.
President Bennett Kill.
Here. All right, now can we have the Pledge of Allegiance? All right, first on our agenda is a public hearing for a bond sale. Can I get a motion to enter the public hearing concerning the intent of the Board of Education to sell not to exceed $6 million working cash fund bonds for the purpose of increasing the district's working cash fund? So moved.
Second.
Member Dorner.
Yes.
Member Fay.
Yes.
Member Qualcheck.
Yes.
Member Leto.
Yes.
Member Nelson.
Yes.
President Bennett Kill.
Yes. All right. Does the board have any further comments on the bond sale? Seeing none. Secretary, do you have any written testimony you need to read into the record?
I do not.
Okay. Does anyone from the audience have any written or oral comments on the bond sale? All right, seeing none. All persons desiring to be heard have been given an opportunity to present oral and written testimony with respect to the proposed issuance of the bonds. Can I have a motion to adjourn the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Member Fay.
Yes.
Member Qualcheck.
Yes.
Member Leto.
Yes.
Member Nelson.
Yes.
Member Dorner.
Yes.
President Bennett Kill.
Yes. Okay, next is our student member report, or student board member report.
So at Tuesday at around 10 a.m., we were able to go into the administrator's building, and we were able to look at the presentation that will be presented to you all after us. And we spent around an hour and 30 minutes giving our input on all of the data that was presented.
A few takeaways I had. First of all, I was surprised on the math map tests, the percentage of people that reached their projected growth. It didn't vary that much based on demographic, gender, or program. And second of all, I think that adding additional co-curriculars to Lions Park could increase the attendance rate, as students would be more compelled to show up to school, because Lincoln has a lot, Fairview has a lot, Westbrook doesn't have that many, which makes sense because it's for younger kids, but Lions Park does not have that much compared to the others, so.
And as you will see in the data, and as Zoe mentioned, the discrepancy is huge between Lions Park and Fairview. It is very apparent. We were also able to look at some social and emotional data as well and give our inputs as students. So I found that the data matched my experience as a student mostly. I felt very safe in the district, and I feel the MySaber scores and the threat levels matched my experience. Anything else?
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. And this being our last meeting, I would personally like to say thank you to all of you for allowing me to gain valuable experiences and to really, be more a part of this community. I feel like I've gained so much insight on how our school district worked, and I will carry with me this experience throughout the rest of my life. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to have us share our student voice, and thank you all for listening and finding meaning of it. And I'm really grateful for this experience, as it provided me with many skills that I can utilize later in life. Yeah.
Thanks, Thanks, you two. Does anybody have any questions for our student board members? Chris?
Not a question, but a comment, which is thank you both again for having the courage to want to do this and committing the time and effort to being the first graduating group of student board members. So you guys, whether you know it or not, you have now blazed a trail that everyone who comes after you is going to follow. So you should be quite proud of that. So thanks for your contributions and good luck at Prospect, and come back and see us.
Eileen?
Just reiterating what Chris is saying, thank you guys. You are the first and definitely not the last. And I'm hoping that just even with your experience that our next student board members have even more experience and even more involved with our board and the community and the district. And so thank you so much for your service. We really appreciate it.
I just want to say, again, reiterate, thank you for coming and for taking the opportunity to be of service to our district. And I actually can give you some insight on one of the items that you brought up, the Lions Park extracurriculars. Most of the Lions Park extracurriculars are actually funded by the PTO. So those were not, that's why there is the note on the, in the data itself that said, the presentation that said this was school-sponsored. It's still not as much, still not as many as Fairview, and it's still a great observation, but I just wanted to let you know that was something that was going on. If anybody else doesn't have any comments? No? Thank you again.
Can I just say a couple things? You two have been amazing, and I have had the joy of knowing you since you were both little kids at Westbrook, and now you are big kids, and you're going to be continuing to be amazing human beings as you've always been. Thank you to your parents and your families for your sacrifice and your support. And I have to say, I'm going to credit Alex as well, because he was in the Mount Prospect 4th of July parade, although with the Mount Prospect band, the Prospect High School band, and Zoe with the District 57 school board float. First time ever we completed the parade with enough candy. I think it has to do with these two. Yeah, before you, we could never have done that. And so, and for the first time, I think in the history, we completed with even enough to have our children and any of the kids throwing candy got a little bit to celebrate at the end.
We're very appreciative of that,
yes,
by the way.
Yes, that was the least of your contributions, but significant nonetheless. But I know that you're going to continue to do amazing things at Prospect, and you are going to keep pushing, I think, your schools, not only in high school and in college, and in your lives to keep making the world a better place, because you're amazing people and you don't kind of sit back and wait for other people to do it. You put yourselves out there. You had the courage to step into something that was unknown, and I hope you realize how special you are to District 57 and how much we will always be here for you to cheer you on. And if you feel like setbacks or anything, sometimes that's a place to come back and hear a pep talk from us, because sometimes it gets a little hard out there, but you have the tenacity and the right hearts and minds to be the difference in the world. So just know we are so proud of you, and we're going to invite you back every time to come back and walk with us in the parade and be part of any events, because you will always be special to us. So congratulations. Thank you. And yeah, you're welcome to say, but do we want to do a little picture? Okay. That's how we celebrate around here.
All right, we have come to the point in our meeting or agenda that I'll open up the floor for community comments. The District 57 Board of Education welcomes community participation in an effort to both listen to our stakeholders and keep the meeting moving. I want to remind everyone of our public participation procedures and guidelines, which is available in Board Policy 2:230. Individuals wishing to address the board can do so during the community comments portion of the agenda. Individuals should provide their name and limit their comments to 3 minutes. Please remember that this is not a dialogue between you and the board. The board is in listening mode during this time. Individuals wishing to contact the Board of Education are welcome to do so via the District 57 website under the Board of Education tab. Individuals should behave with respect and civility towards others and abide by Board Policy 8:30, visitors to and conduct on school property. Do we have any community comments? Seeing none. All right. We'll move on to staff and superintendent reports. And first up is the Spring 2025 academic and SEL data presentation.
All right, thank you. So Dr. Vonderhaar and Ms. Tyburski will be presenting this data today. And I also want to give a shout out, and I'm sure they will as well, to Mark Fior, who really collaborated and supported a lot of the data collection and visualization. So it was a great team effort, and take it away.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And like Dr. Gore just shared, we are grateful to Mark as well as our student board members who were helpful in giving their insight. So, sorry. All right, so in District 57, we focus on educating the whole child and providing outstanding student experiences that promote academic excellence, social emotional growth, and lifelong learning. In this presentation, along with the board memo that you have, we'll focus on our academics, which I will cover, and then I'll turn it over to Sarah Tyburski to review our social, emotional, and behavioral data. Tonight's presentation will focus on student growth and achievement. We will also disaggregate this data by subgroups, and when we talk about subgroups, that includes the different programs that we have, like special education and multilingual services, as well as subgroups like ethnicity and gender. This information helps us to identify strengths and areas for growth. And during our presentation, I'll share some information regarding the professional learning that we are planning as a result, and then we'll provide the board with an update later this fall with more specific goals. Okay, we'll start with academics. And we wanted to provide a snapshot of our demographics. Our district is primarily white, and then the next largest groups are Hispanic with 14%, and Asian students with 8%, and our Hispanic population continues to grow. I believe we were at 11% last year. And then this is our data analysis structure. So 3 times per year, we complete benchmarking to assess student progress. We use this information to inform our teaching and learning practices, allocate resources, and determine different interventions and supports. Our data is reviewed by our district leadership team, and then that data is then reviewed by building leadership teams across all of our buildings, as well as district committees like our multilingual team or special education team, as well as grade level teams. We review reports from NWEA MAP and FastBridge, and then again, I'm going to shout out Mark. He also created a district dashboard for us that allows us to view the data in multiple ways, so we can disaggregate by school, grade level, ethnicity, gender, different programs. So that's been really helpful, especially for our district leadership teams and building leadership teams. Tonight, I'll share information about achievement data and growth. Achievement data provides us with a snapshot of how well students perform against a standard, and then growth focuses on progress students make throughout the year. So during our fall presentation, I'll come back to the board. We'll share our achievement data and how our students are performing at that time on benchmarks, as well as information from the Illinois report card. But during this time, we focus on growth over the course of the year and how students perform from fall to spring. All right, throughout the academic portion of our presentation, you'll see 2 different graphs with different colors. The graphs on the left with blue represent achievement data, and the grass with green represent fall to spring growth. So you can see data over the last 3 years. And this is the first year we are implementing a new reading curriculum, K through 8. So K through 5 is HMH into reading, and then 6 through 8 is SAVIS, My Perspectives. We anticipate having an implementation dip where we would see some potentially lower scores this year in reading. And I'll say in grades 1 through 8, we didn't really see that dip. In fact, our first grade our first grade scores showed improvement from previous years. For kindergarten, we have seen a dip over the last 3 years. I want to remind you that the data includes both half-day and full-day programs. However, we want to make sure that we are addressing this. So in response to this data, as well as classroom data and data from our new reading program, the kindergarten team, as well as literacy support specialists and multilingual teachers, will receive targeted professional learning, focus on the new program, as well as strengthening those foundational literacy instructional skills, including phonemic awareness, letter sound correspondence, early decoding strategies, and more targeted small group instruction. We want to make sure our kindergarten team has a strong understanding of the teaching and learning practices associated with the new curriculum. Teachers will also engage in collaborative planning, data analysis, and use of evidence-based instructional practices to support student growth. We'll also, this year, we'll also be engaging in planning and professional development, focused on preparing for full-day kindergarten with that team. And then to support our incoming first grade students, because there are those lower scores in kindergarten, we do have some students who are enrolled in Summer Bridge, as well as booster groups with our literacy support specialists at the start of this year. And then our first grade team will be reviewing fall data to identify any gaps that they see across the grade level to make sure that we are addressing that for all of our students. Now we are looking over at our MAP scores. So this is 2nd through 8th grade, again focused on reading. So our achievement percentiles for each grade continue to be well above the national average. Our spring achievement scores have stayed relatively similar to previous years. Some have gone up a little and some have gone down a little bit. We do see a lot of positive growth, especially in 6th and 7th grade compared to previous years. And in terms of professional learning for reading, this past year we really focused on implementation and learning the new curriculum. And then this year we are going to focus on more targeted and differentiated small group instruction at the elementary level, and then really working alongside our tech department to really support that data analysis so we can have more data-driven decision-making in terms of teaching and learning practices. We also have had many teams over the summer doing summer curriculum work to further support implementation. Okay, this slide indicates the percentage of students who met or exceeded their projected fall to spring growth in reading by subgroup. We had almost 60% of students who met or exceeded their projected fall to spring growth scores in reading, which is up from 57.8% from last year. In most categories, we see some improvement. In our Hispanic population, which has been a focus for our district, has really grown quite a bit. We went from 48% last year to 55.56%. We do see slightly lower growth from our multilingual learners in the area of reading. We had 57.52% of our students who are low income meet or exceed their growth targets, which is up from 46.9% from last year. In addition to focusing on the data-driven teaching and learning practices for professional learning this year, we will also focus on strategies across all of our schools that support multilingual learners and special education students. That includes visuals, scaffolding, collaborative learning, and language routines, which will ensure that all learners can access content in ways that align with their strengths. Our multilingual team will also engage in a more thorough analysis of data coupled with their access data to inform teaching and learning practices. We'll also have a special education steering committee this year that will focus on analyzing data and reviewing programming. We are also going to be reviewing our literacy support interventions this year. Okay, I'm going to jump on over to math. So again, this is looking at kindergarten and first grade. And our math scores remained relatively consistent. This year we will be undergoing a math curriculum review. At the kindergarten level, we wanted to ensure that our new math curriculum has a strong focus on number sense, counting strategies, and early operations using developmentally appropriate strategies like manipulatives, math talks, and visual models. As part of our full-day kindergarten work that we'll be engaging in this year, we'll also focus on embedding math into daily routines to meet diverse student needs. And here are our math scores for 2nd through 8th grade. This data looks pretty similar to how it has in the past. We continue to demonstrate very strong achievement in math scores across 2nd through 8th grade. And when we take a look at that map growth by different subgroup, we're seeing consistency with last year's data. Last spring, we were 78.75% of students who met or exceeded their growth percentiles, and now we're at 78%. We're proud of this data. We also see an increase in the percentage of Hispanic students meeting their projected growth. That's up by 5% since last year. So we don't see any noticeable gaps between growth for ethnicities, program, or gender, which I believe Zoe had mentioned in reviewing that data. So we are seeing that equitable growth across the board. Next, I'm going to jump to our District 214 data. We are grateful for our partnership with District 214 and District 214 sender schools. We'll continue with our shared Institute Day in January, and all of our middle school math teachers this past year engaged in professional learning with District 214 and District 214 sender schools. We're going to continue to build off of that work this year, and we're going to be focusing on Algebra 1 outcomes. And then all of our departments regularly meet to collaborate with District 214 and District 214 sender schools. We're also grateful for our data sharing and collaboration, which are ongoing. And due to this collaboration, we were able to better understand how our students are doing by the end of their 9th grade year. And we look forward to continuing to grow this collaboration. As you all know, District 214 recently underwent strategic planning, so there are some changes to some of the data collection. So last year I presented a dashboard, career readiness dashboard, and they do not have that updated this year, so I will not show you that, but I will show you our 9th grade end of year outcomes for our Lincoln graduates. This slide also shows current 8th grade data. So you can see on the left column are all of the different criteria or categories. Then you have grade 8, so these are our current 8th graders. And then under grade 9, you can see how District 57 compares to other districts who also feed into Prospect. And then our goal is to take our 8th grade data and track that over the next 4 years to see how our students do at the end of high school, so we can see how our information helps, what correlations we have with that data. So by 9th grade, our students continue to demonstrate strong engagement. Attendance was at 92.3%, and 85% of our 9th graders participated in at least one co-curricular activity. We do see a dip in GPA in 9th grade, and we have about half of our students participating in honors or advanced placement for ELA, math, and social science. We have about 29% of our students placing in an honors science. And that I would like to dig into a little bit more. We don't have all of the information in terms of if families elected not to have their students take those classes, if they were placed in it. So I want to do some more digging about that so we can look at those scores. All right. This next slide focuses on research from the University of Chicago Consortium on School Research that emphasizes that middle school grade GPA and attendance are the strongest predictors of high school success. We did use District 214 success criteria of at least a 2.8 GPA and at least 90% attendance, and we currently have 84% of our 8th grade students who are on track. And we want to ensure a strong transition to high school, so we'll continue to disaggregate this data at the district level as well as at Lincoln to identify students who may need additional support and reinforce school-wide efforts to promote strong attendance and academic behaviors. So we always want to provide support as well as accelerate growth. So we provide support to students needing it through our multi-tiered systems of support. That includes our math and literacy support. We also have our benchmarking data and progress monitoring data informs our math and literacy supports. We expanded our RISE or reading program last year to all schools. And we also offer Summer Bridge to students needing additional support in math and reading. And then there are a number of ways that we are looking to accelerate growth, which really begins with our district leadership team and building leadership teams analyzing disaggregated data. Our building leadership teams develop school improvement plans, and then data are used to inform teaching and learning practices within the classroom. We'll be refining our ELA curriculum this year by focusing on that data-driven instruction and small group differentiated instruction. We'll also be piloting math curriculum this year. We're reviewing our literacy interventions as well. And as I mentioned, our teachers have been hard at work doing summer curriculum work and professional development over the last couple of months. And then throughout the presentation, I shared information regarding the professional learning our staff will be engaging in this upcoming school year. I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to review our social, emotional, and behavioral data.
Thank you, Dr. Vonderhaar. Good evening, everybody. So I'm going to walk us through our social, emotional, behavioral data. As Dr. Vonderhaar was saying earlier, we have different systems in place to review the data. For instance, we have our district leadership team, our parent-teacher behavior advisory committee, and our district equity leadership team. Each building also has their own leadership team. The grade levels and departments regularly meet to look at this data, as well as our social, emotional learning committees within the buildings. Our main focus always is to look at those universal supports and make sure we're intervening before there's a problem. So teaching those positive school-wide expectations, providing those second step lessons at least weekly, having circles with our classes to develop some community amongst our peers, and also different events like the Bee Sashes, which are so fun and so exciting. So if you haven't been when one is awarded at Westbrook, you have to go. As well as 5-star data at Lincoln, which has been just at the end of its first year and very well positively received. So let's talk a little bit about our data and how we're monitoring students and determining when we have to intervene with students who might be struggling in a certain area. This was our first year with MySabers. MySabers is 2nd through 8th grade. It's a survey that the student takes themselves. With that data, we're not looking for a higher score necessarily. It really is about maintaining and identifying students who are in need of support. So although our data looks good, it's nice to see it in the 90s that we're meeting the needs of most of our students. It's not necessarily about seeing the growth throughout the year. It's because different students might have different needs throughout the year. One student who might be struggling in the fall, hopefully we've intervened, supported them, and then another one pops up and we need to intervene with that student. So it varies throughout the year. So don't think of it as a measure like Dr. Vonderhaar is just talking about where we want to see improvement. The maintenance is a good sign. In addition to MySabers, we also are using attendance data, which I'll talk a little bit more about later, tardies, nurses' visits, and log entries, which will include office discipline referrals, as well as when students need to seek support from our mental health teams. So looking at all these different data sources, it gives us a good idea which students need additional support, since each of these measures indicates a different need. So a student who's coming up as struggling with attendance may not come up on any other of the indicators, but that attendance is significant enough to impact their learning overall, so we need to do something to support them. Our teams are reviewing this 3 times a year, and they do a nice job of identifying those students in need. All right, the next thing I'm going to talk to you about tonight is something that we're required to review per Board Policy 7180, and this is the prevention of and response to bullying, intimidation, and harassment. The board is required to look at frequency of victimization data, student, staff, and family observation of safety at school, identification of areas of school where bullying occurs, the types of bullying utilized, bystander intervention, or participation. All this information is also reviewed by the Parent-Teacher Behavior Advisory Committee, and they make recommendations to changes to our bullying prevention practices. But to start, we'll go to the definition of bullying. This is the definition that we teach students, so this is through second step. You'll see that it's slightly different for our younger students for kindergarten through 5th grade versus 6th through 8th grade. And this is more about the appropriateness of the language when we're teaching it, but you'll see that we're looking at something that is unkind, unfair, there's a power imbalance, and often repeated over time. This very small print is the Illinois School Board of Education definition of bullying. So it's quite extensive. This is the definition that our administrators are using, though, when they're investigating. So the definition that I showed you prior was what we teach students so that they feel empowered to report, so they can help support themselves or a peer. But this is the actual information that we would say, does this meet, or do we have enough evidence to suggest that bullying has occurred here? The main difference for the ISBE's definition is it could just be one significant event. It does not necessarily need to be a repetitive event. We really want to promote student, staff, and family observations of safety, so we have lots of different ways in which anyone can report a concern. We have regular communication with our staff on how to report bullying. It needs to be done immediately to an administrator so we can intervene and address it. Parents are certainly very good about reporting to administrators or staff, in which then would be directed to the administrator. We have information on our website. We send out information in our newsletters, both at the district level and at the school level. And then we have different reporting systems. You're probably familiar with See Something, Say Something. So that's an internal document that we developed a few years ago. It is regularly used, which is great that our community, not just our students, are using the form. So I feel like that's very positive of their engagement. And then we're also a member of Safe to Help Illinois, which is a great resource for students or anyone to seek help. It could be for you're worried about someone else, or it could be something that you need help with personally. And we do regularly get calls for them in which we have to intervene with a student to make sure that they are safe. Here's our founded incidents of bullying. So on the left is the unfounded, on the right is the founded. Unfounded simply means there's not enough evidence to suggest that it meets the definition of bullying. Not that harm didn't occur, but we can't necessarily say this was bullying. So with this information, the majority occurred at Lincoln with 7, and then 3 at Fairview and 1 at Lions Park. In your board memo, there is a breakdown of the information for location, types of bullying, and bystander intervention and participation. It's important to note, as I said, that just because it's not an instance of bullying necessarily, we do still need to support the students involved. So that could be increased supervision. It could be related to developing safety plans, providing social work support for either the student who has been bullied or the student who is exhibiting bullying behavior. And also, we could also just have a class meeting and talk about with everybody and how we need to treat each other the way that we want to be treated. Talking about a class charter, making sure that I feel respected when you kind of language. So all of that good support that teachers are regularly doing with their students. As a district, we've been more focused on some proactive communication, but a goal of ours is to have more frequent teaching throughout the year of how students and staff can support each other, support students through bullying occurrences. So we're currently investigating different tools that we could potentially use in order to address some of these concerns. The next area is looking at safety. Suspensions is this first area here. Through some board requests, as well as through our district equity leadership team, there was a desire to look at the safety of our students here at District 57. So this is really just the first information that we'll likely share about this. This will be an ongoing information that we share through district equity leadership team, potentially district leadership team could certainly be doing work around this too. So there's a few different areas where we will likely be addressing this and collecting some more information to determine how our students are feeling about being here at school. So suspensions is one of the sources of data we're looking at because when we suspend a student, we're considering whether their presence at school would pose a continued threat or if their presence at school would significantly disrupt learning. So those are the two main categories that we would have to think about before we would suspend a student. So we had 3 out-of-school suspensions for this school year. 2 of those were at Lincoln, and 1 of them was at Lions Park. The next area I thought it would be helpful to look at is our threat assessment protocol, since that is specifically related to safety. And this is just some background on what our protocol is. We use the Virginia Student Threat Assessment Model. It is a very thorough model. It has been around for a while now, and it was developed after the Virginia Tech shootings. So they spent a lot of time and were very thoughtful in the development of this. When looking at this, it's really anytime a student is exhibiting behavior, either verbal or nonverbal, that suggests there could be some threat. Staff would immediately and verbally inform the principal or assistant principal. And then the threat assessment is conducted with an administrator and either a school psychologist, social worker, counselor, or another administrator. So when providing these assessments, they are quite lengthy because we're interviewing anyone who could possibly have information about the threat. So we're not making a decision in which we're lacking information. Once we collect all the information, we're looking at categorizing the threat into 3 different levels. The first level is a low-level threat. So the threat is vague, implausible. We often see this with some of our younger students in which they're drawing a picture and a sword, and they're like, well, this is Johnny, and there's a sword, and then you have to talk to them about why is Johnny in your picture with a sword. And often it's because, well, I like Johnny. I don't want to hurt him. He's okay, but we're investigating to make sure that is the outcome of the situation and that he is not really thinking of hurting Johnny. So those are typical low-level threats. But as we move up the chain a little bit, we look at level 2, and that is a little more directed, usually specific to a person. More recent examples is probably through social media. A student is telling another student, like, you better not come to school tomorrow through social media. It's directed at another student. It could definitely be perceived as threatening. So we're intervening, right? We're collecting information. We're figuring out, is this student actually going to do anything to hurt this other student? And I should say, especially with level 2 and level 3, the threat assessment protocol is different than discipline. So we go through the threat assessment protocol, we assign a level, and then often there's still discipline associated with it. Level 3 is a high level of threat. That's when we're engaging with Mount Prospect Police Department, who is always super helpful and always willing to talk through situations with us. So we're very grateful for their partnership. But then we have different responses to the levels once we've determined the level of how we should intervene. The administration does a great job with working through these processes, and they take the time they need to make sure it's done well. Here is our data for the district, looking at the outcome level for threat assessments. You'll see that the majority of their threat assessment levels are that level 1, and then we have level 2 and level 3. Although this may seem high, this is the first time we're sharing this information, so it's hard to judge since this isn't something that I'm sharing longitudinal data over. But I do think it shows that our community is very engaged, that they're reporting things regularly, that we're taking things seriously. It's not something that we take lightly when somebody believes that somebody might be capable of harming someone else. So very grateful for our community and our staff for regularly reporting these things, and our administrators for taking everything so seriously. Okay, moving on to attendance. As Zoe kind of indicated earlier with her comment, so we have an attendance issue, and she was speculating on ways to improvement, which is one of the reasons she is wonderful. But our attendance data here is looking at chronic absenteeism. So this is the number of these are students who have missed 10% or more school days throughout the year, and these absences are with or without a valid excuse. So I highlight that because it's helpful to understand why a student might not be at school. So without a valid excuse is vacation, typically, or that we did not get a report of why the student wasn't there that day. We weren't able to make contact with the parent. It's illness, doctor's appointments, those are the main thing, family emergencies, so things you would typically expect, reasons a student may be absent. This is our longitudinal data, which shows pre-pandemic levels. As you can see, we haven't quite gotten much lower than we did last year. We had a nice drop after 2022, but we're still hovering at that 11%. We consistently have higher rates at Westbrook and Lincoln, which is somewhat surprising and not surprising at the same time. Our Lincoln students have more will to not do something, perhaps, and our Westbrook students are completely dependent on their parents to get them there. So we're planning on some more targeted interventions. Mr. Fiore was very helpful in conducting a heat map and looking at some specific times of the year in which students are really struggling, in particular at Westbrook. And we'll continue to focus at Lincoln, and especially with targeted interventions, but our hope is that by creating good habits when students are younger, we won't continue to see problems as they are older. We found that January tends to be a challenging time for students to be in school, so continuing to look at that and talk about different ways that we can be more proactive with students and families. Now we'll take a look at extracurricular and club participation. Again, Zoe was sharing some of this information, and this is just staff-sponsored clubs. This does not include the PTO clubs, which we're so grateful to have more opportunities for. But we continue to have problems with the number of opportunities at Lions Park and Westbrook, which obviously impacts our total participants because there's just fewer opportunities for students to participate in. We are currently working with with Mount Prospect Public Library to see if we can have them come in and do some different extracurriculars with our students, which I'm sure they would love to do. They always do nice work. And also work with our staff on how we can make some of the lunch buddy groups, which are very popular at Lions Park, into more of a structured club type of activity. This slide shows the percentage of students who have participated in at least one club or sport and students who participated in more than one. So again, it makes sense that when there's more opportunities, you're going to have more students participating. But this gives you a better picture since the first slide was straight a number of participants. All right. So here are some of our goals for the end. A more detailed information is within your board memo. We're continuing to implement My Sabers going into this school year for all of our 2nd through 8th graders. We're grateful for the board's approval last year of our board certified behavioral analyst. We'll continue to utilize in order to support behavioral interventions. And our parent teacher behavior advisory committee will be reviewing our bullying data and making recommendations based on that. Our district leadership team will analyze all of this data in some way, and we'll refine our communication for attendance, look at our club and extracurricular data, and as well as our safety data, including the student belonging survey, which Fairview, Lions Park, and Lincoln do. Dr. Vonderhaar mentioned our Special Education Steering Committee, which I'm excited to have. For those of you who have been here for a while, you might remember we had this a number of years ago, so we're bringing it back to take a closer look at our programming and really making sure that we're meeting the needs of our students who receive that support. And then I'll let Dr. Vonderhaar finish. Sorry.
No, that's okay. And then I think I mentioned many of these throughout my part of the presentation, but during this school year, we will be refining our English language arts curricula and having more targeted professional learning focused specifically on small group instruction and differentiation. We'll also be reviewing math K through 8. And then we're also looking at our literacy interventions. So we'll be doing some pilots this year and really identifying what supports. Our team wants to have a more targeted approach so that our interventions are really matching our student needs. And then we will be planning for full day kindergarten, which will also focus on that reading component. And then we always value that our partnership with District 214 and District 214 Center Schools, and we're always looking for ways to continue that collaboration. With that, if there are any questions.
Can I say one more thing?
Sorry.
I just want to say before we do questions, how enjoyable it was to work with our student board members. Not often that people like to talk about data, and they humored us so well. So they had great insights, and it was a pleasure. So thank you for the opportunity.
Who would like to start? Eileen?
Thank you both very much for all this data and the presentation. Really appreciate it. A couple questions about maybe it's observation for the reading with kindergarten and then first grade. I mean, there's a huge difference between kindergarten and first grade. Is there, I'm just spitballing, are there fewer kids potentially going to preschool versus?
Great question. I'm not sure on that. I do know when we looked at our fall data, our scores for reading were lower compared to previous years. So I'm not positive on that, but that's something to look into.
Yeah, I mean, that would kind of make sense. And I mean, if that's the case, where kindergarten becomes the new preschool again versus the way it was. That's just my thought. Another thing with math, when you're doing reviews for math and new curriculum, is there the possibility to still maintain or keep the current curriculum since it's doing so well?
Great question. So there's an updated version. So when we're looking at K through 5, that's one of the areas that we will be piloting. We're excited about some of the other programs too, where it seems to be more differentiated. So we're hoping for some small group instruction, which we haven't done a ton of throughout the district. So yes, I think especially at the younger grade, we are looking for a program that is focused more on number sense and building those strong foundational skills. That's an area of growth for us that we've noted. And so yes, there is an updated version, but we are excited about the other programs we're piloting too.
Okay, great. And then this is more an observation or comment. In regards to like the D214 and the science thing, I have a incoming freshman, and so does Corinne, and this is my 5th child going to like their elective nights. And I have to say, I've never had a time where they've discouraged people to not do honors or AP as much as I have in this last session. I was kind of shocked, to tell you the truth, the amount of discouragement that was given. So that could be one possibility too.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, that's something that we've talked with the admin team over there, just being aware of mental health. High school's really hard, and so really working alongside students and families to figure out what's the best fit for them.
Right. So yeah, that was just, I wanted to give you that observation. When I experienced that, I thought it was very different from previous years going through that. So thank you. Thank you, guys.
Pam?
Thank you. It was a great presentation. I have to study more so I understand more. I'm coming at it from a librarian standpoint. One of my goals in life seems to be partnerships, and I am on the Library Foundation Board, and we fund youth programs. That's one of the things we fund, and we fund the Shakespeare Project of Chicago too. So we're always looking for funding cool things. So you might want to tell the Youth Services Department to come back to the foundation, and I will support. I'm sure the rest of our people on the foundation board would support if there is any need for funding, or if they need to buy something that's specific to coming to do a co-curricular program at Lions, because then they can take it and they can develop it for other schools. So it could be a pilot, and we're always looking to enrich what we offer to the community. So
I appreciate that, and I do want to shout out the Mount Prospect Public Library. They have been phenomenal, especially Steph Wolferman. I will send her an email, and I'm like, what ideas do you have? And she'll send me back 4 or 5 already. So I appreciate that, and we look forward to seeing what we can do with them. Thank you.
Kim?
I just wanted to double back to what Eileen had said about the honors and AP classes at 214. I wanted to clarify, I guess, what it is we're actually looking at or measuring. Is it students that were placed, as in they were eligible, qualified to take those classes, or is it students that actually enrolled in those classes?
Great question, and that was something I asked 214. It is initial placement in, so that could be within the first month. So they may have moved around a little bit.
Okay. Because I think
that's what they refer to it.
Okay. Because it seems like, towards the end of the year before you actually register for any classes, you're aware of what you're qualified to take, what you're eligible to take. To me, that would mean placement, which would mean that the idea of what a student actually chooses to take wouldn't necessarily impact the numbers that you're looking at.
Great question. That's something that I'm going to bring back to District 214 to get clarification on.
Sure.
Thank you.
And then I had a similar comment with regard to the math curriculum. It seems like things are going really well with what we have, and not to be cliche, but it seems like if it's not broke, right? And so I was curious to know whether the goal of curriculum review in general is always to replace a curriculum. Certainly, I can understand they can be updated. But if the goal isn't necessarily we always want a new thing every 5 years, it's, to me at least, it's worth considering sticking with what we have. It seems to be working really well.
Yes, so that's something that we had elementary math committee as well as a middle school math committee met in the spring, and we identified some different curricula. Our math curriculum hasn't been fully reviewed in a number of years. But that is definitely something that the committee as a whole was like, well, this is working, so what can we do? And some publishers have made great improvements and some have not made great improvements. So we need to take a look at all of that. We're also talking with surrounding districts to see what's working for them as well.
Wonderful. I had just a couple other things. Again, just trying to sort of better understand or clarify the data. So in terms of absenteeism, and especially thinking about Westbrook, are we including all of our Westbrook students in that figure? So it's Circle of Friends or
Correct.
half-day
Yes.
kindergarten?
Mhm.
Okay. Because from that perspective, I could certainly understand, especially if you have a kindergartner and an older child, right? The thought of, well, it's just a half day,
Yeah.
right? So how much are they really missing? And then that starts to add up down the
Yes.
line.
Yes.
Or the same for Circle of Friends, right? It's 2.5 hours, right? And I can't swing bringing my child because of whatever it happens to be.
Yes.
So I'd be curious then as we move into a full day model, whether that starts to impact those figures. And then with regard to the clubs, I know the focus of the data was about how many are staff sponsored. Do we know how many Lions Park clubs are PTO sponsored? Like how many total clubs there are?
So our numbers are not great with that data collection, so that's something we're going to be working on this year to make sure that we have a better idea of how many students are actually participating in all of the offered PTO clubs. So we have a better idea of what is available to Lions Park students.
Yeah, it just strikes me that if you were looking at the total number of opportunities as opposed to just the ones that staff is willing to support, it might give a broader
Absolutely.
picture. And then my thought too, in terms of the sort of low number of clubs available to Westbrook students, again, it stands to reason to me that some of the challenge could be the half-day model,
Yes.
right? That AM students might want to participate, but if the club's at the end of the day,
Yes.
how would you go about that? So, okay, those were just things I wanted to clarify. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ray? Do you have any questions?
I do have one question. Thank you so much for the presentation. The one question I was just curious about was which staff or what kinds of staff are included in the threat assessment protocol. That was the only question I had.
When you say what staff are included in it, are you saying who might be part of the interview process or who's actually doing the threat assessment?
I guess both.
Okay. So for the including and understanding what occurred, it is anybody who might have knowledge. So we're going to talk to teachers, instructional assistants, coaches, whoever might have knowledge. It could be parents, depending upon what information that they may provide. So we really try to be comprehensive with that. And then as far as actually collecting the information, it's the principal or assistant principal and then either a mental health person. But when we're making determinations on outcomes, it is dependent upon the needs of the students. So some students we already know have plans in place, so we're going to include teachers, their social worker, because maybe the social worker that did the threat assessment wasn't the one that typically works with them, so we're able to make a good outcome and determine appropriate consequences, but also supports.
And I guess just to follow up, so that group that you mentioned, principal, assistant principal, all those are involved, those are the ones who are sort of determining the level of...
Correct.
Right, okay.
Yes.
Chris?
Well, thank you both very much. I personally love data, so happy to sit in your office and talk data with you whenever you want. Going back to the kindergarten, what seems like a pretty alarming drop over the last year. You guys I think Dr. Vonderhaar, you did, rattled off some of the things we're doing to try to fix that. That would have, maybe this is a future thing to add. That would have been great to see in the presentation because to me, that's really the important thing. We have this clear gap here. What are we doing about it, right? So that'd be a good thing to add when we do this again, just a note there. I also worried, and I know it's in our strategic plan to do the math curriculum review. I have to admit I'm a little worried about that, just because of how well things are going, how thinly spread we are. You know, I leave it up to Dr. Gore and all of you to decide that that's a priority or not, but given all the things we have going on, I guess I would just maybe question whether that's what we want to be spending a lot of time on, but I understand the logic for doing it, and hey, you can always get better, right, even if you're doing well. On the absenteeism, I think some of the explanations that you gave and you know, that others asked questions about were good. What do we attribute the really substantial increase since COVID to? I mean, I could see when COVID was still a very real thing, it kind of made sense, but we are, you know, knock on wood, well past that now, and yet it doesn't seem to get any better. Do you have any theories as to why that still remains a problem?
I can say that it is a problem nationwide still. It is not specific to our district. The state chronic absenteeism, it's about like 28% or something. It is super high. So it continues to be a problem everywhere. Anecdotally, a lot of more people are taking vacations at time when it's convenient to their family. They want to spend time. They value the time that they're spending with their family and doing some really cool things that are a lot of our kids get to do, which we appreciate that they can do some learning there. And I think some of it is also just a little bit of still that COVID mindset where like any type of illness is not okay to come to school, right? So just making sure that we're educating, like we're going back to the regular ones where you wouldn't come to school, like you got a fever, you're vomiting. Those are the reasons you don't come to school now. If you have a cough, you have a cough. If you're positive for something, that's certainly something that you need to work through and talk to your doctor about. But I think people are being more cautious and also just taking more opportunities to spend family time.
I would also add, and correct me, team, I think there's been a much more intensive focus on this topic, and arguably our data is maybe more accurate than it ever has been.
Yes.
Not to say that our practices were ever laissez-faire, but I think we certainly have much more intensity, not just in District 57, but across the country because of this topic being such a, you know, all the research associated with this as being an indicator. So
yes,
it may falsely look like an intensification of this versus the reality. It's probably always been a bit higher than the way we used to report it, because I don't think it just wasn't such a focus as well.
We reviewed our attendance procedures about 3 years ago too. So we were getting all on the same page to make sure we had similar practices across all of our buildings, which there were just some slight differences. So we tightened up a lot of our data collection, definitely.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I was curious if COVID is this a correlation or causation thing? Or does it just happen to be that this is happening now? Or
great question, Chris.
And I don't expect you to know the answer to that, but it was odd to me that
I would love to know that answer. So if you know researchers that are doing it,
I'll let you know.
I do think one thing we can do, though, as a team is keep like disaggregating and studying. I know we are internally, but the way we're reporting it to the board are excused versus unexcused. Because I think for our population, as Sarah alluded to, like a lot of our families are going to really amazing places as a family, or they're traveling to see relatives internationally, and they're keeping up with their schoolwork, they're prioritizing their work. It isn't always such an indicator that they're regressing. So I think teasing out our internal data, despite the fact that the definition of chronic absenteeism includes both, might also be interesting for us to report, because it's not perfect, but it kind of gives a little bit of insight into the types of absences. I know in my own household, I've received the indication that we have hit the chronic absenteeism mark in the Gore family. And I am disappointed, but I'm like, all for good reasons. I think it's dentist appointments or doctor's appointments and things like that, or sickness. And, you know, I think this intensification of this metric has been a little bit jolting for us in the way that it's so seriously studied and reported, but I don't think it always tells the story in each community in the same way. So,
Gotcha, makes sense. On the prospect data, and thank you again for continuing to do this. Of course, this is what happens when you come to us with data. We want
No,
more
that's
data,
great.
right? So
Yes.
So and I'm just curious. The initial placement metric honestly doesn't tell me a whole lot, right? I mean, I guess what that says is how are our students' performance in grade 8 preparing them, in theory, to do well in honors and AP classes in grade 9. But I mean, I guess to me a better metric is how many are still in those classes at the end of the year, right? So they were placed there, or they could have been placed there, but did they stay there, right? Did they perform well while there? And again, I do hate to keep asking you
No,
guys
please.
for more stuff,
Please.
but that would be pretty instructive to me
Sure.
is how are they doing once they're in those classes?
Thank you.
Sorry, I meant to go in order of the presentation on my questions, and of course I'm not, so I'm making you skip all over the place. Can you go to the slide on the My Sabres data, if possible? How long have we been collecting this again?
1 year.
1 year. Because my question was going to be, how are we trending in this area? And of course, we don't
This
have
is
a
the trend.
And I guess I have to be honest, it's alarming to me that 10, 8, 9% of our students are in that red box there, right? I mean, to me, that doesn't look good to me. I don't know how we compare to other districts, or if this is kind of what's expected or what's not, but it seemed pretty alarming to me.
Yeah.
I mean, that's 1 in 10 of our kids that the data's telling us are at risk for social emotional behavior problems, which seems really high.
So let me clarify. The light purple above the line is low risk. So they'll never say no risk. And then there is that, I don't know, pinkish color, and then there's like a more of a magenta color that's very small. So that pinkish color is actually, I don't know if you can see it, it's so tiny.
Oh, yeah, okay. I see what you're
So the pinkish is some risk, and the magenta is like they're at risk. We need to intervene immediately. So the some risk students will have an area that we're concerned about, but they're not widely concerned.
Gotcha,
so it could be their engagement in the classroom. That's why they're coming up. They have very low engagement. They're like, I hate school. I don't want to pay attention in class. And they're like, oh, we need to go check on that kid and figure out why.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you. Yeah, I was reading that as
It's very hard to see.
10% were very hard to see.
Yes.
And then my last question on the threat assessments. So am I correct, I assume in interpreting this, that over the last year we had 38 incidents or 38, I don't know what you call them, reports or?
Assessments.
So I understand that, they get grouped into these areas. I guess the question I have is what happens next? I mean, is there what steps do we take after we've kind of, yes, we've grouped the assessment there, but what are we doing with these kids to make sure that we're providing them the supports they need and obviously mitigating threats?
So we do track individual student information. So we're able to see over time if like similar students are popping up multiple times. So that's very helpful in making sure we're addressing those students' needs. But when any assessment occurs, we're developing a plan to move forward. So especially if they're at a level 2 or 3, we're having regular check-ins with that student. Maybe they're coming to the office first thing in the morning and we're doing a check-in before they're even able to go to class. Maybe they weren't receiving social work services, but now they are. So we're building all these supports in place that they may not have had before. And if they do have supports in place, we're talking about how can we make this better? What is or is not working for this child?
That's a great answer. Are we looking at correlations between the students these 38 students and the MySaber data, I mean, are they, because in theory, that would be a predictive indication of something like this, right? Is there that correlation or not really?
So we look at log entry, so that discipline data, so they often will be captured in that as well, unless they were a level 1 in which we're not giving like a consequence. So they could have had a threat assessment and then a log entry in addition, so for the office discipline referral. So they would be captured typically, but not necessarily if it was a relatively like minor threat.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I actually do have one more question. I'm sorry. The disparity between the Fairview and Lions Park staff-sponsored club, I'm just curious how we ended up there. I mean, how did that happen to be where Fairview has so many more staff-sponsored clubs than Lions Park? Is there a reason for that, or it just seems odd?
I think it is part of the culture of Fairview. So new staff come in and everybody else is doing a club. So you feel like I need to do a club too, right? So nothing against our like Lions Park staff by any means, because they're regularly having the lunch bunches and other opportunities to get to know students. They're just not doing it in such a structured format. Fairview spent a long time developing that culture. So even staff that started this past year in the fall, they were like, oh, I got to do a club. It felt like a need to do it because it is so ingrained.
And I think, and Corinne, and definitely I'm sure Ray could talk about it, and we have several Lions Park family came as well. I think it is something that kudos to the PTO too for teaming with Principal Kelly and trying to kind of be creative in that reality. I think because our structure is, it is a stipend that staff receive for doing it, and as Sarah mentioned, I mean, it's curious because it's not for lack of investment or willingness to work during their lunch hours without being paid to spend time and build relationship with kids. So it's something that I think we have to keep kind of understanding and trying to help see how we can keep increasing, whether it's through parent PTO partnerships, whether it's through the public library, whether it's through some other means. Just the name of the game is really like making sure kids have connections and connectivity within their schools, because we know that that's the type of thing that makes them say, I want to go to school. Right. My favorite time of school is when I'm doing Lego club or when I'm doing, any number of things that bring me happiness, obviously, and all the other great things that are happening during their formal school day. But it is really incredible, the culture at Fairview, that is what is the case. I think it really is probably more of an anomaly in the way that this many elementary staff members give that much more of their time to provide these opportunities than it is about any deficit in the other schools. I think it's pretty remarkable. So.
Well, I will give a shout out to Fairview in that regard. I remember when my girls first started going there, and they announced clubs, and they're before school. Many of them are. And I'm like, there's no way they're going to do that. And sure enough, they both have participated in them, and they get up early, and they go, and they love it. And that shocked me. So if they can get the girls to get up an hour early, they must be doing something.
That's right.
All right. Well, thank you both very much. Great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you again. Oh, well, I'm going to have my comments, and then we'll come back to you. Thank you, Pam. I do have a couple of questions. Thank you for the data. I also like a good data dump. My questions are mostly about what are our hoped for percentile growth for reading and math growth and achievement over the score from year to year. Like, what is our target percentile growth for each one of those?
So we want to take our data and also compare with our school improvement plans, and then we can bring that to the board in August, if that would be okay.
That'd be great. My other question is surrounding our growth targets from pre-pandemic to today, or to current stand, because one of the concerns is that we have either recouped or surpassed our the learning loss from pre-pandemic. And is that something you can speak to?
Yes, we are close. I would say we were around the 60th percentile of students meeting their growth targets prior to the pandemic, and we're about 58, 59. So we're close, but not quite there yet.
Is that for reading or math, or both?
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me just confirm that. So that is for reading, and then for math, actually, we have surpassed that. So and I have it right in front of me. So prior to the pandemic, we had about 60% of students meeting their growth targets. We were close to that. We were at 59.85% this year. And then for math, we were around the 60th or 60% meeting their growth targets, 63rd. And now we are at 78% of students meeting their growth targets.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hi, the data is wonderful. Thank you. I have a thought about the reviewing of the math program. I think it's a good idea to review the math curriculum and to see if anything has changed and if anything has been added, because we know that every couple of years, the expectation for what a student needs to know goes up, increases. And we want our 8th graders to be fluent in math so that when they go to Prospect, they're not behind. Prospect, I'm sure, is doing the same reviewing, and they may be increasing what they're teaching at a younger age, at a younger grade level, and we want our students to be as prepared as possible for that. And I will give you the philosophy or the perspective of where I'm coming from. My son was on the math team at Prospect, and one of the math debates that he went to was for a topic that he had not been taught. Of course not taught. It was a higher level math. It was beyond calculus. And it was not anything that he would have been taught in D57. But it also was not taught at Prospect. And the competition among the other students, the ones who went to schools like Stevenson or more intense schools, had been taught that. And so his coach, his teacher coach, had given him a heads up about what was coming a couple of months ahead. And Jose, being the diligent overachiever that he was, went to the library, took out books on that topic, and also then told me titles to interlibrary loan for him. And he studied this on his own. He's also someone who had gone to Harper and gone to Northeastern and taken physics and math classes while he was in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th year high school. So I think it's a good idea to know what they're going into to be prepared, and I'm sure that Prospect is increasing at a younger age what they're doing. So we want our kids to be prepared. And I will tell you that Jose won the debate, or whatever, the competition.
Eileen?
One last thing. Just a kudos to you guys for bringing up with the growth for our ethnicities, to bring up the Hispanic. I mean, that is huge because there was a definite dip last year. So great job on that. And then the English language learners, special ed, bringing that. I mean, you did a great job with that. So let's hope it keeps going. Thank you, guys.
I do have one more question. I had forgotten that I had. When we're talking about threat assessments, can you give me a little bit more of a definition of what is considered a threat? Like, are we talking about physical safety? Are we talking about to myself, to others? Like,
Yeah. So the information that I shared with you tonight was just threat to others. So that could be verbal or nonverbal. we also have risk assessments that is a threat to themselves. So we have a certain protocol that we follow in case anyone has any suicidal ideation, in which we're making sure that we're keeping those students safe as well. That data is not in the information that I shared with you tonight.
Thank you. Unless anybody else has any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to our Building Brighter Futures update.
Excellent. So exciting that we had our first bid this past month. Just as a reminder, we talked about, I know, last board meeting, but we went out for bid for some electrical work at Westbrook. We're putting in a new transformer that will replace the old transformer, because the old transformer was inside what will now be the courtyard. And so we had a pre-bid meeting, I think the day after the last board meeting, and then we had a bid opening. We had 5 bids, and as you see later on in our agenda, we'll be looking to approve the low bid from Prospect Electric for $346,000. Just to give you an idea too, the estimate of this work was in a range. It's harder when it's such a small specific thing to be done, but the range was between $300,000 and $500,000. So I think we were on the lower end of what that range was, which hopefully we continue in that way in future bids. So that's what's going on over at Westbrook, and then continuing to work on just what the interiors are looking at. We are kind of in that process right now of a lot of the guts of both at Lincoln and Westbrook, so not as exciting to share when we talk about how gutters are going to have flow, and maybe what ceiling tiles look like. We were talking about that yesterday. So, but the meetings and continue, lots of meetings, lots of conversations, lots of decisions being made as we continue to just move forward in the process. Any questions?
I actually don't have a question, but a comment, and it's just for the action we're going to take later to approve the bid. And I just want to explain what my vote's going to be. So this industry is where I live professionally. We actually manufacture some of the equipment my company does that will be bought by whoever we select. Every one of the companies that bid are one of our customers. So I will be abstaining when we vote tonight. I just want to explain why that is. So thank you.
And I forgot to say just that work also, just so we know, will be done. They're going to do the interior work at winter break, and then the exterior work spring break. So it'll be all ready to go when we start construction.
All right, thank you so much, Jason. All right, going back to you, we're going to move on to the 2024-25 budget review and the 25-26 budget preview.
All right, let's talk budget. It feels like it was just yesterday that we were talking about the fiscal year 25 budget preview. And so tonight we'll be looking at both a review of last year's budget and then a preview of our budget for next year. And before I jump in, I just want to thank, first of all, the business office, our business office, who works so hard. You can imagine how many POs and how many revenue disbursements come in throughout a year. And so they do an amazing job of getting the money into the right accounts and really keeping track. And so I appreciate everything they do, as well as any of our budget administrators, which is really our schools, as well as all of our departments at the admin building, who do an amazing job of helping build the budget. We collaborate a lot, and then obviously watching it closely throughout the year and coming to me if there's any concerns or issues or questions or things that come up throughout the year, as there always are. And we work together to make sure that we can work it out and have a successful year. So I appreciate all the work. I do it every time. I will never be able to work this thing. Mark, help me. Thank you. I appreciate it. Someday. All right, so just a reminder about budget process, and when we're creating a budget for the year, really it's about at that point in time we're obviously gathering information, and information changes or we get additional information throughout, but it is something that we're going to develop at this point in time and really help give us a roadmap for the year of what it's going to look like. And so it's developed through feedback, it's developed through collaboration. There is some assumptions that we need to make because we don't have exact numbers for everything, but we're looking to build that budget as precise as exact as possible, and then stick to it throughout the year. Just a reminder about some vocabulary words we're going to talk about tonight. Unaudited, you'll probably hear me say it a lot in this presentation. Our auditors have already come out for a week in June, and they'll be back in August. But at this point, any of the numbers we talked about from last year are unaudited, and we know they will change. They will not be the same because as more money comes in, sometimes we receive money in July that really belongs in last year. Sometimes we spend money in July that really should have been spent last year just because we didn't have the invoices yet. So it's no fault of anybody, but money will move back into the last year later on. So we'll work with our auditors on that. Revenue, just a reminder that revenue is the money we receive, expenditures, the money we spent, and then our fiscal year, July 1st to June 30th. So that is what we're talking about. All right, I'm going to try one more time. Does it work? Yes. And so in our strategic plan, we talk a lot about what's important with the financial and really looking at how to maintain that balanced budget to really be fiscally responsible within our budget. And so we work closely to make sure that no stones unturned when looking at revenue opportunities and revenue possibilities, and then looking at our expenditures and how we're spending money and how to make sure that we're doing everything we can to help support all the work that was being talked about earlier in the presentation. And so just a reminder that our budget is structured into funds, and so you can see the funds there. And as we go forward, I'll point out, but we do levy or ask for money, through property taxes for all of the funds except for capital projects. So capital projects we don't levy for; we do transfer from operations and maintenance. We can transfer from other funds too, but the last couple of years we've only transferred all the money from operations and maintenance to help cover the cost of capital projects. Working cash, we do levy for it. We don't spend any money out of that account, and so there will be a time down the road, especially with all the construction, where we will be looking at moving probably money from working cash to one of the other funds to help fund some of the work that's being done. So as we jump into our fiscal year 25 budget review, just wanted to point out that one thing is during this last year, we did receive in December, we started receiving referendum money. And so we sold bonds at just under $15 million. And that money is not included in any of these charts. It wasn't budgeted for, and so it didn't make sense, I think, to put it in. I will next month, present a little bit more about not only last year and the bonds, but I'll talk about next year and what it's going to look like as well. But just so you know, we received about $15 million in December, and then since that time until June 30th, we spent about $3 million. So that's kind of where we're at, and then I'll give you next month a better chart of exactly what it's going to look like then moving forward. So as we look at our review of last year's budget, I'm excited. I'm not going to bury the lead. I'm going to start with it right front and center, is that in the bottom right, you can see that was our surplus for this year. We'll obviously talk about why that was, but about $1.17 million is our surplus for this year. So that's money that then we will have moving forward. We know coming down the line, not only the construction we're doing, but also in 2 years with full-day kindergarten, that'll increase our expenditure. So we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to get ready for that. And also just a reminder that that's unaudited, so that number will change, but that's where we're at right now. you can see the different funds. And so, for example, things that would jump out to me, in capital projects, you see that, there's a big negative number there. But again, we don't levy for that. So we will transfer money from that O&M fund where there's a positive number of, about 2.5 million. We'll transfer some of that money over to cover capital projects. So funding, the funds work in a way where we, when we get to that tax levy and we talk about how we're going to levy for money, that's where we can look at, okay, the education fund needs, maybe more money next year. Let's levy more money in there. So the bottom line stays the same, but how we levy throughout all the different funds can change each year. Let's jump into a little more specific. So this is the revenue side. And so you can see a couple different things that I just want to point out. Property taxes, our debt service definitely changed this year. And so that was why that number at property taxes was off a little bit this year, as we anticipated it being a little bit higher than is what we received. But like I said, I'll present next month where you'll see, because next year we're actually going to receive more than we'll need. Just the way things work, Cook County is a little different in how property taxes are paid. So we'll talk about that. Everything else I was pretty proud of on our budget. Interest earnings is something that will jump out. We received a lot more in interest. I knew I was conservative last year. I didn't think I was that conservative last year, but knowing that it's fluctuated a lot in the last couple of years. I was a bit concerned. You'll see later on when we talk about next year's budget that you'll see that I've anticipated a higher budget for interest next year, because we do think that it's going to stick around 4%, but we'll see. So, it's still, I'm always cautiously optimistic on some of these things. Everything else, pretty much where I thought. The other state revenue, some of these numbers. So the other state revenue includes money we receive back from the state for special education, like reimbursements for private tuition or transportation. Tough numbers to anticipate, and so we work closely on it. But again, they can be high and they can be low, and we don't want to budget for something and then not receive it. I would rather be the other way. Again, I don't want to be off by this much, but it's really tough to figure those out. The federal revenue, that does include ESSER funds in there, and some grant money that way. So we won't have ESSER funds anymore moving forward. ESSER was a multi-year grant, but it's done, and so we won't receive that anymore, but that's where some of that federal revenue came from. So that's where the revenue came from. At the bottom, you can see then that we received about $1 million more than we anticipated in revenue. I'm going to keep going forward. Expenditures, I'm not loving that we went over budget by about $30,000. I am excited to share that I think it was on the first slide, but it's about 0.9% above the budget. So I think we were pretty close. And there are a couple places where we saw that we spent more than we anticipated, and we'll be looking at it. We know that we underspent in some places. We know that we went over budget in some places. And so we'll try to make the budget more accurate next year. But, we've already been talking about pupil transportation for student services. That's one place where we need to do it. There's no question about it. But how do we budget better for something like that? And it's hard to anticipate some of these things. We know that construction came in under budget. We know that staff benefits were over. And so again, we'll go back and look at, did more people take insurance this year that didn't last year? Where did that come from? Did they just change? Maybe they were taking less expensive insurance last year and decided to move to a more expensive one this year. So those are things we'll look at. But I'm excited that, all in all, the budget came out pretty much right on where we were anticipating. So that was great. And so that's the budget from last year. And then let's talk about a preview for next year. So as we look at next year, just a calendar of really our timeline, our roadmap for how we got here. So the budget process really starts in January when CFAC comes and presents to the board. We're looking at financial projections. We're looking at what does the future hold, and I think that hopefully helps the board as the board's making decisions about staffing plans and what to approve and how to approve that. Our staffing makes up about 75% of our budget, so it's probably the most important thing that we're looking at when talking about a budget. Once that's approved, that allows me to then start working on, all right, let's build that into the budget. Let's start having our meetings. So I'll meet with all of our budget administrators, get input on what's next year look like. We don't look at a budget and say, okay, this is what we spent last year, so we'll spend the same this year, or we didn't spend everything last year, so therefore we're going to cut it next year. That's not how we look at it. We'll actually just start from ground zero and say, what do we need for next year? And that's where it starts, and everybody kind of sharing with me where they're at. I then will work on the budget behind the scenes and then need to go back to people if either we're over budget or not working where we need to be. So, this year that all comes in. In the meantime, we're also gathering as much information as we can. So we're hearing about insurance increases. We're hearing about different contracts that we have there, maybe a year, and what does it look like next year. So we're getting all that information, putting that into the budget in order to get to where we are today. And just moving forward, so today is just a preview of what the budget will look like. Next month, the board will be presented with the tentative budget for approval. And then the following month, we then do our budget hearing and then approve our final budget. And so school budgets are a little different. Our budget started July 1st, but gets approved in September. So we're working with a budget right now, but we are finalizing and tweaking as much as we can up until September. All right, and so let's talk about revenue. We know that the majority of our money comes from property taxes, so that's those local sources. I would say the big change this year, and we're watching closely though, is what's going to happen with some of those federal grants. Different school districts are doing different things. I think we're kind of right in the middle. There's some school districts that I talked to today that are leaving all the grant money in right now and seeing kind of where it goes. I know of another district that took it all out of their budget for now, and they'll see where it goes. We're a little in the middle. I think we're pretty confident we're going to receive IDEA money, so we've left the IDEA money in there for the special education grant. But I have taken out all the title grants, so all of that is not part of the budget right now. We'd love to see that next year, and if we hear differently before August or September, we'll put it in. Otherwise, we'll kind of go into the year not expecting it, and then if we get it, that's great. But I'd rather err again on the side of caution. So that's where our revenue is. Just a reminder, though, that none of these numbers and any of this slide or the future slides is anything talking about any of the referendum bonds, any of that money. So we're trying to keep it separate. On the board packet, the financial packet, we always keep it separate there too. I think it confuses things if we start mixing it together. So this is the revenue kind of broken down by the different functions, and so you can see that interest is where after a couple years now of being higher up, we're gonna raise our expected interest revenue. We are still awaiting some final grant money, so that's where you see on the bottom there the other federal revenue. Last year we were looking at $342,000. We received $790,000. We've now dropped it down to $50,000, which I can tell you right now that school maintenance grant is $50,000. But other than that, we're hesitant to include, or I'm hesitant to include anything until we hear more from the federal government. So that's revenue. Everything else is pretty much where it would be. I reached out to the village, for example, about TIF revenue this year just to get an estimate from them of what they think, and that's where that number comes from. We do get student impact fees, and so that is something that's not known at this time, but we're working on it to learn. Then when it comes to expenditures, so the blue, the red, those are salaries and then benefits, so that adds up to right around 75%, which is where we are typically at. But then, everything else, purchase services, we're paying somebody to work. It's a lot of operations and maintenance, right? Facilities, keeping them running, or paying people to help lead professional development, things like that. That's our purchase services. We are continuing, for example, next year, our Learning Spaces Committee that's been meeting. We've been working on furniture for classrooms and what the future looks like. So we have some more pilot classrooms this year. So that's included in the budget. So different things as we work through. Again, the budget administrators give me the information, we'll put it in, and that's what builds the budget and the expectations for this year. This is a breakdown, just looking at the different objects from expenditures, and so we increase salaries based on the percentage. You'll see that it doesn't increase a ton, and that is because we did have retirements, and we know that when a teacher retires at a certain level and a new teacher comes in at a lower level, that does help our budget, and so that's something we're looking at. I also wanted to point out that we have the past many years earmarked $2 million towards capital outlay. It's in the budget again this year. However, as promised as part of our referendum, 1.5 million of that is earmarked towards the construction. So whether it's spent this year, we will spend the referendum bond money first, because that, as you've heard from Bob Lewis before, with arbitrage and making sure that we spend it at a certain time. So that money will be spent first just because of timing. So that 1.5 million that's earmarked probably will not be spent this year in this budget. So when I come back to you in a year and show you that, the capital outlay line, you'll probably see 2 million budget, and hopefully we'll be seeing about 500,000 that's spent, but not more. That's expenditures. And so right now the budget has, when you look at revenue and expenditures and subtract, there's a surplus of about $40,000, I believe it was, that we're at. That number will definitely change by next month as we continue to get more information, both on the revenue and expenditure side. But obviously always the goal is to have a surplus and not be in deficit. Let me make sure I talked about everything. And so before I get to questions, just next steps, like I said, I'll be continuing to refine the budget on both sides, revenue and expenditures, as well as putting together a better a presentation for you all on what the bonds look like for next year, so that you'll have an idea of everything at the August meeting. We'll approve the tentative budget at August and then the final budget at September. Questions about the budget?
Kim. Thank you, as always, for sharing that information in such a understandable way for those of us who are numbers challenged. I wanted to ask, in terms of the surplus, understanding that it's obviously a very small number compared to the overall budget, does that number have any impact potentially on the levy for next year, or for this coming year?
The surplus from fiscal year 25, or the anticipated surplus in the budget for next year?
Both.
Or just surplus?
Yeah.
Does the surplus impact the levy? No.
Right. I guess my thought was, if we ended up with extra money, that potentially we wouldn't need to ask for a proportionate amount.
Sure.
In the future.
Yeah, I would say that we, knowing that in 2 years with full day kindergarten, we anticipate the hiring of many teachers, staff, and that goes to perpetuity, right? Mm-hmm. So I would say that I wouldn't look at it as extra money, but I would look at it as money that we have that will be spent in a couple years. I also know that part of our promise from the referendum was that we would put some of our own fund balance towards it. So that's fund balance, when that $1 million, which again, unaudited, and so once the auditor comes in, it'll probably be a little less, but once that's audited, that money becomes fund balance, and then that's part of the money that will be going towards construction.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate you correcting me, right? Not extra, perhaps unanticipated is the better word.
Unanticipated, sure.
Unanticipated. Sure. And that was my other question too, in terms of, we've consistently had this $2 million total for capital expenses. that, you know, has continued throughout the past several years' budgets, understanding that, you know, 2/3 of that 2 million is going to be for expenses related to construction. Given that you've already said we don't anticipate spending that in this budget year, is the expectation then for next year, we would actually have, what, 3.5 budgeted?
So we will build into the budget. So if you think about it, like if 1.5 is set aside this year, and 1.5, let's just say, is set aside next year. We said we'd do it for 3 years, so it would be $4.5 million. That $4.5 million will be part of paying for the total construction cost, which we anticipated about $97 million. 85 is from referendum. So what will happen is we have a schedule of when we're going to be paying for both the architects and the construction manager. That goes all the way through, I think, to 2027, about December of 2027. You know, the construction should be done in August, but we'll continue paying for a little while. So when we hit probably around the summer of 27 is when we'll start needing to use that money. So yes, I put it in the budget because otherwise I think it would look like we'd have this big surplus. And I think it's important for us to know that that's earmarked for different ways. So I'll make sure to always have that asterisk and have that note on there. But I wouldn't budget more next year for it. I'll just know that, okay, when we're putting away this money in our fund balance, knowing that in 2 years it's going to be spent.
Okay, and I think that's the part that I was missing or didn't quite put together, the fund balance component, right? It's not like this money is just floating around somewhere and then we're going to grab it and use it for this. It's budgeted, it's accounted for, and then to the extent it isn't spent on what it's delineated for, it's going to kind of go in a pocket, and then we'll use it from the pocket for something else. So
correct.
Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
Goes in the bank account.
Yes.
Right.
Chris.
Well, thank you, Jason, as always. I have to, first of all, as every year I've been on the board, and I know well before that, coming in with the balanced budget and a surplus, so that's great. I mean, I do not want to understate how important that is and how much we and the community appreciates that. So thank you. I also have to give you credit for being willing to say that you were 0.0009% high on expenditures. I mean, you could have just said 0, and I was right on budget, but you were honest about that, and so I give you props for that. To Kim's question, I think I know the answer to this, but in case I don't, and for anyone else who may be wondering, I totally understand why we would spend the referendum bond money first for the arbitrage region that Bob explained so well. When we get near the end, though, and we've got that money that we have earmarked from the capital budget, we would spend that before. So we get to a point where we could say, all right, we've got $4.5 million now that we have earmarked from the capital budget. We would spend that instead of selling an additional $4.5 million worth of referendum bonds, right?
We couldn't sell an additional. So when the referendum that was approved for 85 million. And that's a not to exceed number.
Yeah,
so.
I didn't ask the question very well.
Oh, okay.
If we end up coming in a little lower on budget than we thought, which you're going to do, right?
That would be great.
We would use that capital money that we've earmarked before we would sell an additional $4.5 million of referendum bonds, right? I assume.
So the bonds will be sold before we would get to that point.
Okay.
So
we wouldn't.
I hear your question.
Yeah.
But no, I think then.
It would be too
I would
late
love to be
make
under
that
budget.
call.
I don't see that happening as much, but
wishful thinking. Maybe.
I love the wishful thinking. I think that's great. But yeah, we wouldn't be at a point. We could at that point make a decision. I mean, if the best things right, or if we're under budget by $5 million, at that point we could decide what we want to do about that, and that might be then more of a conversation that Kim was having about.
Well, let's hope.
Levy.
Right?
Yeah, that'd be great.
And then I had just a. I don't know if it's a question or a comment, but I guess the thing that concerns me a little with your projected budget. I mean, there's a razor thin surplus there, right? I think substantially less than we projected last year. And because we're earmarking 75% of our capital budget is really earmarked, I always think of capital budget as kind of discretionary, right? I mean, it's not salaries and benefits that are completely non-discretionary. It's not O&M that is really also not discretionary. Capital projects can be delayed if we have to, right? We don't want to, but they could be.
Sure.
We now are reducing that discretionary amount from $2 million to $500,000. And so because of that, I guess I would, and I hate to do this, but I'd challenge you to see if we can try to make that projected surplus just a little higher in case we end up with, a situation where property taxes come in lower, and it just seems like our margin for error is a little lower than it used to be, and our projected surplus is also a little lower than it used to be, and I could see that being a perfect storm that would not work out well for us.
Yeah, I would say that we've had 4 years in a row of surplus, so I think we're in a good place. I would also say that right now, the expenditures I'm feeling good about. It's the revenue that I think we're at a low end, and we're hoping, like with some of these grants and things, that hopefully will change. So and that would help with that razor thin surplus. Right. So, but yes, absolutely, I'll look at it and see what I can do.
Awesome, thank you.
Sure.
Pam.
I have two things. The first thing is that the property taxes this year will not come in August 1st. We know that. We haven't gotten the bills. Supposedly, I had called Elk Grove Township assessor's office, and they're saying that it would be at the very end of summer that we would get the bill. So the very end of summer we may not get the bill in August. Due in September, we may get the bill in the end of summer is September 21st. So what if we got the bill at the middle of September? You wouldn't get your money, and it wouldn't start trickling in until October. So that's for this year. Mm-hmm. And it seems that periodically, more recently, we're seeing those slowdowns for the property tax money coming in. So that's something to be aware of, because you have to pay your staff and you have to pay some of your bills, and delaying some of the capital projects depends on what the expense is. I mean, you can't not buy a boiler, you can't not buy certain things, and you don't want to necessarily, I don't know what the loan possibilities are. And you don't have a credit card. So I've been living on a credit card and then paying it off at the end of the month. My second question is, have we heard anything about tariffs affecting us? Has Nicholas said anything?
No, that's Board Member Leto's question. I think you stole it this month.
I chose not to ask it.
You just knew she was going to ask it. No, we have that conversation a lot, and I would say that as of right now, we're feeling good about our estimates and where they're at, and this last bid even shows that. I think, I can't remember when it was, a couple months ago, that I had talked to another district that just went out to bid, and they actually their bids came in under what they budgeted. So I think we're feeling fine. We're, again, cautiously optimistic. So I think, but we do continue to have that conversation. And that's why we're trying also to, obviously go out to bid as quickly, as early as possible. And then to answer your first comment, I know it was a question, but just 2 years ago, the property taxes were delayed. I think it wasn't known how much they were going to be delayed until later on. And at that point, most districts, including ours, we had a lot of money already invested. So it's not that we don't have the money to pay. It's that if it's invested, then you don't have access to it. And we were starting to look at what are those options. This year, knowing that the county has already said that we've made sure that our money that's invested will have enough liquid money. Even 2 years ago, I think we didn't get taxes till December, so it was really late. We never were close to not having money in our bank account, but whether or not it was liquid was always the question. So this year, we are definitely prepared for that.
I think the 2 years ago, they weren't very, I don't want to use the word honest, but they didn't know when the system would be fixed.
Right.
And now there's an issue with the new computer system, but there's also an issue with the appeals because they did the business appeals first, and the business appeals took a big chunk of money away. So our residential property taxes are going to be less friendly.
Eileen? Ray?
Just maybe some clarifying questions, just so I understand. So looking at the chart for fiscal year 25 actuals expenditure to revenue, so under the capital projects, I know it's unaudited, would I read that as we did $1.68 million worth of capital projects last fiscal year, or is that not actual projects done and some of that is something else?
No, that's how much we spent in capital projects for the last fiscal year. That one, I will say, when that says unaudited, it should be like in all caps for unaudited, because what happens with the capital projects is a little different, because when the work, like we will often pay for work after July 1st, the work was done, or lots of the work was done before July 1st. So the auditors will come in and say, no, this shouldn't have been paid in this year. This should be paid in a different year. So that but yes, we from July 1st till June 30th paid $1.68 million in capital projects.
Got it. So, and then I guess as a follow-up to that, for the fiscal year 26 expenditure budget, so is that, I guess how I'm reading it, as the there's 2.3 million, correct? That's sort of an estimate, of which a big portion of that will be earmarked for construction later date, or is that two different things?
I'm going to find where you
Sorry,
are.
the fiscal year 26 expenditure, the
Yes.
capital outlay, where it talks under the official fiscal year 26 budget column.
Yes, so capital outlay can include more than just the $2 million for capital. So we have some other accounts that get pulled into that as well. So of that 2,382,000, $2 million is our capital project budget.
Got
Of
it.
that $2 million, 1.5 will be earmarked for construction. 500,000 is what we'll be looking at to do different projects.
Perfect.
And just as a reminder for everyone, that the reason we said that we would do that is because most of the things that we were looking to do on our facility plan were at Lincoln. And so knowing that we don't now have to do that at Lincoln is that's how we're able to save that money.
Super. That's the clarification I needed. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Thank you, Dr. Case.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the fall 2025 back to school update.
Okay, great. And just shout out to Dr. Case for being such a stickler to make sure every penny is accounted for. And he guards this money like it's his own. So that's what you want and from someone that has overseen that work. So great job. And he somehow manages to be very pleasant and nice about it, which is quite remarkable. So just some kind of midsummer updates. I'm sure many of us have noticed the back to school commercials are starting. And so those of us in this work are just excited. I know some of the kids see it and they get, I don't want to see those commercials. And I delight in seeing those back to school commercials. So we've had a really wonderful hiring summer. Shout out to Karen Schwartzwald, as well as all of our principals, administrators for working so hard to secure the very best for any openings that we had. And we are continuing to do some kind of finalization of those openings. But as of July 11th, the following personnel have been recommended for hire: 9 teachers, 1 social worker, 2 psychologists, 1 instructional coach, 1 board certified behavioral analyst, and 1 assistant principal who is actually in the audience tonight. And if it's any sign of her grit for being in those chairs until this position I think she's going to be a keeper. We also, for our support staff, have had 4 instructional assistants, 1 Kids Corner supervisor, 1 Kids Corner assistant, and currently our vacancies are as follows: 1 first grade teacher, 3 instructional assistants, and 1 part-time Kids Corner assistant. So, the nature of this is that could change, but we're really encouraged and really proud of the wonderful, high-quality staff that we've been able to bring to our team. Speaking of that, I think maybe this is a good transition into telling a little bit about our recommendation to the board for a new assistant principal. Janet Rothwell is here with us tonight, and Janet is our recommendation to replace the position that was vacated by Lena DeVito, who was with us for 2 years as assistant principal at Lincoln. We will wish her well as she returns to the district that we like to call she grew up in and worked and prior to coming to District 57. So she kind of returned home to District 59, which they're lucky to have her back, but we're really excited about this opportunity to bring Janet to our team. Janet comes with a really unique background. She has a degree from University of Wisconsin in communication, minor in dance. Decided that her calling into education happened at the end of that I think senior year at Wisconsin, which I love those stories of when you know. So she pursued it with fervor. She went to a program that specialized in dance education where she could get her degree. She actually worked in North Carolina providing that. Interestingly, if the school districts could afford it, they were required to provide dance as education to their students. So I don't know if that currently is the case, but how progressive. So, in then coming back to Illinois, Janet served in multiple different positions, most recently at Stevenson High School, and decided she really wanted to expand her leadership opportunities after a successful career in teaching, and has worked as a dean at Streamwood High School in District 46 for the past 2 years. So, there were wonderfully qualified and impressive candidates that we were excited to see from a pool. And of that impressive group, Janet rose to the top just in her skill set, her background, her alignment, and her values, and then also confirmed by her references about the work she has conducted. I think most impressive, maybe of all, being a working mom with 3 boys at home, which is not as always the easiest, commuting over 40 minutes every day. She was somehow the PTO president of her kids' elementary school, which I still think, I don't know how, but that is so cool. And we are really excited about Janet to be joining the team should the board approve her contract tonight. And we will wrap around our mentoring for Janet to make sure she has whatever information she needs to be successful. Principal Larson is excited to prepare opportunities for Janet to meet the Lincoln team should her contract be approved tonight, etc. But that's a little bit about her. And then in terms of just the upcoming dates, we're really excited to welcome back our staff in August. Officially, our Staff Institute days are the 18th through the 20th of August, with the first day of school for grades 1 through 8 being on August 21st. And then kindergarten will start the 25th and preschool starts the 28th. We invite, of course, the board to be part of our welcome back events, but I know we'll talk about that a little bit later in the board president's report. So that's all we've got so far, but busy working and we're excited.
Any questions for Mary? Go ahead, Ray.
I just had one question about sort of in terms of vacancies, how that compares to previous years at this time period. Because again, I know that recently, or probably for a period of years, it's been the concern about just having enough staff and how these vacancy numbers are we optimistic that this is
we are
better
optimistic.
Okay,
we are
great.
optimistic. Thank you for that question. I mean, I think the larger landscape of education, we do regularly talk about just how it's kind of, in some places, even in the state, it's like at crisis levels and their fill rates. We're very fortunate that we remain, I think, a desirable region, and we are competitive, but we have to really do our due diligence, and certainly less kids are going into this field in general. So this is encouraging, especially for positions like school psychologists, which are predictably really difficult to find highly qualified people who are willing to take these positions because they can go anywhere. So we were really excited about those positions, and really just, I think all of these recommendations that have come over the summer have come with a lot of enthusiasm from not just the administrators, but also the colleagues that will be working with them who have served on the hiring committees. And I think just it's hopefully really reflective of what a deeply committed staff we have when we have candidates coming to see the types of people they'll be working with. So I'm sure that that conveys, the culture of the team that they'll be hopefully joining. So thanks to our District 57 staff who participate in that way.
All right, thank you, Dr. Kaur. Moving on to our FOIA reports.
All right, we have 4 FOIA reports between June 18th and July 17th, 2025. Responses have been sent, and the detailed report is available in your board packet.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to the consent agenda. Kim, you reviewed the bills.
Yes, and all was as expected.
Excellent. All right. So can I get a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda as follows? Regular business meeting minutes, closed meeting minutes for June 18th, 2025, personnel transactions, financial reports and accounts payable bills, approved tuition reimbursement, and approved fiscal year 25 donation reports.
So moved.
Second.
Member Kowalczyk?
Yes.
Member Leto?
Yes.
Member Nelson?
Yes.
Member Dorner?
Yes.
Member Fay?
Yes.
President Bennett Kill?
Yes. Okay, moving on to unfinished business. So, in this, we need to approve the Board of Education to sell not to exceed $6 million working cash fund bonds for the purpose of increasing the district's working cash fund. So, can I get a motion to approve that sale?
So moved.
Second.
Member Leto?
Yes.
Member Nelson?
Yes.
Member Dorner?
Yes.
Member Fay?
Yes.
Member Kowalczyk?
Yes.
President Bennett Kill?
Yes. We have our second opportunity for community comments. Should anybody like to comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to new business. And the first item on new business is approving the pre-bid for Westbrook. So can I get a motion to approve the pre-bid for Westbrook?
So moved.
Second it.
Member Nelson?
Yes.
Member Dorner?
Yes.
Member Fay?
Yes.
Member Kowalczyk?
Yes.
Member Leto?
Abstain.
President Bennett Kill?
Yes. All right, thank you. Our second item of new business is the first read of the Press Plus update, issue 119. Can I get a motion to approve that first read of the Press Plus update?
Point of order, do we have to approve a first read?
No, it's just, okay, sorry.
All right.
We're just doing a first read. No, thank you.
Just reading it.
Just reading it. Any questions? There you go. Is there any questions of the committee on the first read of the update? Okay. Moving on to communications. I have the board governance update. It's in Jen's stead. It was a really, really productive meeting. We decided to rename the process from a succession planning to process for electing board officers. It was a little bit more aligned with what we are actually doing. We looked at how the elections went last year and some improvements to the elections coming up next year. One of them being collecting interest on the positions for about a month out, and then asking the candidates to answer a list of questions that will be written by the government committee and then given to the board members to review, and then speeches during the meeting. We've set our next priority of the ones that have been listed to ensure that all board members understanding their roles and responsibilities. And we're going to work on that in part during our October governance meeting using the information. We're using in part some of the information from our conversations in the October meeting as well. And finally, we're doing a book study. We're reading a book called Great on Their Behalf. And if anybody would like to participate in that book study along with us, please let us know and we can get you a copy. Okay.
You guys are such go-getters, you.
All right. Can I have the NSSEO report?
Yes, so we did not have a meeting in July, as is our custom. However, a couple of things I want to mention. The Kirk HVAC project, which of course is a very interesting one for all of us, is on schedule. Actually, last reported was 1 day ahead of schedule. And now that ESY is over, that's accelerating, fully expected to be complete with this phase by the time all the kiddos come back to school. So great job there. And then the other item, and I was not here last month, so I don't know how much in depth you guys all got into this, but the ask that I first brought up before last meeting was, and just to remind everyone about reviewing the NSSEO Articles of Agreement, which we are in the process of doing. I don't know if anyone has any feedback or input or questions they'd like to ask now. If not, that's okay. I would just ask that if you do have any input, to submit them to Mary and Corinne before August 2nd, preferably. And the reason for that is on August 4th, our next NSSEO Governing Board meeting, this will be a major topic of conversation, or August 6th, not August 4th. Or is it August 4th? It's somewhere in that range, first week August. That will be a topic where we as a governing board are going to review all of the input that has come in through our member district boards and discuss that. That feedback can be either clarification if anything is unclear, where there's something that, gosh, I don't know what this clause means. We need to clarify it. It could be something that you think really shouldn't be there at all, or it could be something that should be added. Anything is fair game. So if you could take a moment to read that document, and if you have anything you'd like me to bring to the governing board, just share that with Mary or Dr. Gore and Corinne by somewhere before August 6th or 4th. The plan with that, by the way, just to spin that forward, is we're going to discuss that at the next governing board meeting. In our next meeting on August 21st, I will bring back the results of that discussion and share with you all. And then on September 3rd, we've been planning a committee of the whole meeting, which will involve the district superintendents, governing board members, potentially any other interested parties, to really look at all the feedback that has come in for the Articles of Agreement, and then really work to refine that, to come to agreement, or at least consensus preferably, where we would then revise the document and then the governing board would ratify it probably at the October meeting. So that's kind of the long-term plan with this. And again, just to remind everybody why we're doing this all came out of the strategic planning work from earlier this year, in a general feeling that, we need to do two things. One, we just need to look at the Articles of Agreement because it's been 10 years since they've been updated. The articles actually say, if you read it, that they're supposed to be reviewed every other year, and so we've gone on 10 years now. So well overdue. And again, there's also an effort to make sure that we are doing whatever is necessary to close any communication gaps between NSSEO and the member districts and strengthen those ties improve the level of and quality of and frequency of communication. And anything that can be written into the articles that would do that is certainly a good thing. So that is all I have. As I said, our next meeting is the first week of August. And yeah, that's it. That's all I got. Unless there's questions.
All good. Have there been any PTO meetings over the summer? No, I didn't think so. I have a couple of quick things for the board president's report, if I can get back to where I'm supposed to be. Okay, this is reminders of events. On Thursday, August 7th, we're going to have our facilities walkthrough at the board. We'll start at 6 p.m. at Lyons Park School, and we'll hit Lyons, Lincoln, Westbrook, and then Fairview. Thursday, August 14th is the new staff luncheon at Fairview. It's from 12 to 1 p.m., and all board members who are available are encouraged to attend. Monday, August 18th is the all-staff welcome back at Fairview. The breakfast will be available in the multipurpose room at Fairview at 7:45, and our program will begin at 8:30. Again, all board members who are available are encouraged to attend. And at the beginning of August, Friday, August 1st, from 8 to 11 is the Ed Red Legislative Breakfast at Wheeling School District 21. If you are interested in attending and have not yet registered, please let Roberta know. And that's all I have for that. We don't have any topics for board discussion. Does anybody have any suggestions for future meetings that they would like to put forward? Okay. We have no need for closed session. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Member Dorner?
Yes.
Member Fay?
Yes.
Member Qualcheck?
Yes.
Member Leto?
Yes.
Member Nelson?
Yes.
President